morning. My name is Dean Mullen. I am the current chair of the Chamber, the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you all to our 2021 version of the Candidates Forum. It's the first of 3 sessions that we're going to be holding over the next day and a half. We'd like to start off with thanking everybody that's tuning in online so that they can hear what all the candidates have to say, that they can speak directly to you. We'd also like to thank all the candidates that are giving up their time at this busy time of their schedule to come be with us for this period of time. I'm personally looking forward to hearing what each one has to say, and I'd like to make a request to each one of them that I'm looking for 2 things. I'd like to, with the temperature that's out there in the political nature right now, let's all work together to be civil. Let's be the true New Brunswickers to really show everybody that a debate can happen and be respectful. And number 2, let's hear what your party has to say. As opposed to critiquing the others, we'd love to hear what each party is going to do if they should be elected. With that, I'll turn it over to Carol, and she will walk through the format. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Good morning, and welcome to today's session, Our Region Matters. My name is Carol Cunningham, and I'm the Director of Events for the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. First, I want to thank our member Encore Global for their support for this event and providing us with this technology today. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. We ask that you click on your mute button to minimize any background noise. We will also provide you with an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session if time permits. If you have a question, please use the chat button on the bottom of your screen. Also, thank you to each of the candidates for taking the time out of their busy schedule to speak to the business community. The format this morning will be to allow each candidate to do a presentation for an opportunity for us to hear about their vision, the platform, and plans regarding the business and economic development for the future of our region. It will then be followed by a Q&A so that each candidate may respond. Before we begin, I'd like to ask David Duplessis, CEO of the Chamber, to please come forward to begin the proceedings.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning. Thank you to Dean and to Carol. My name is David Duplessis. I'm the CEO at the Chamber, and I too would like to welcome everyone here this morning and thank the candidates for taking the time out of their busy schedules of campaigning to join us. We are in challenging times, and the way that we've presented this forum is different than prior years, but our terms of reference remain the same. We are a nonpartisan organization, and as such, do not favor or endorse any one party over another. This was of such importance to our founders over the last 200 years that this approach is actually embedded in our bylaws. Questions that have been received were curated by category, and the most frequent ones were selected. Candidates received the questions in advance in order to provide better content for the forum, and I do apologize to Wayne, who did not receive them until this morning. We do not permit candidates to compare and contrast other party policies, and we ask that you adhere to your own party only. Now, to select which candidate goes first, I will select from the bowl over there on the table, and then the candidate to the immediate right will follow after that candidate. So let's begin. Okay, I'm going to ask Dean to pick one of these.
Josh.
And Josh Floyd is the first person to answer this question. It will then be followed by Wayne, and then to this way. Okay. So the first question that we have to ask is...
Isn't there opening?
Pardon me?
Isn't there an opening?
Oh, they're opening. I'm sorry, you're right. It's the
Josh,
opening.
Yeah, Josh starts
his opening. Boy, did I ever screw up.
They're great questions.
Great questions, too. I was just so anxious to get at them.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to begin by thanking the Chamber for having us all here this morning, and for my fellow candidates for also being here in attendance this morning. I look forward to our discussions. I would like to start off by saying, well, I'm Josh Floyd. I'm your NDP candidate for Fundy Royal this election. And I will, of course, give a brief presentation about the platform that we have for this election. And I would like to start off by saying we, as a party within the NDP, and myself, I'm an average working individual, working in the customer service industry, and that we're out there to work for everyday working people and small and medium-sized businesses, and that is a tradition that I really like about us. Now, one of the top issues that's been coming to mind when I've been going around, and when I drive on the back roads in the St. Martin's region and all around different parts of the region in Fundy Royal, is that we need better access to phone and internet connectivity across the region, and the NDP has a plan to increase funding to better allow for more internet and phone services in the many dead zones that exist throughout the riding. And we will do this while still maintaining low and fair rates for everybody. Now, being in a pandemic right now, of course, one of the biggest thing also that is on people's mind is the healthcare service that is being provided in the country and across the region. And one of the many things I'm hearing from people is that they can't always afford their medication. So what we want to do in the NDP, we want to make it so nobody has to ever choose between putting dinner on their plate or getting their medication. So what we want to do is we want to implement a national pharmacare program for everybody across the country. That's one of the big things that we want to do. And I'm somebody that has a relative in a long-term care home, so I understand what is going on with that. And we want to, in the NDP, end for-profit long-term care, and to be able to put more money into families' pockets, and people are able to spend that money at, of course, at businesses that they would have. And another tradition, while I'm speaking about healthcare, is that the NDP, of course, is known, its predecessor, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, under the former Premier Saskatchewan, Tommy Douglas. He implemented Medicare, and that is a tradition we want to continue. It's something I want to continue on. And we want to be able to provide healthcare from head to toe for everybody in Canada, regardless of income, so that average working people can better able to afford it. Take for example myself, for example, I'm somebody that, yes, I need dental work done myself. I understand the pain that comes along with that, and that's something I really like about our platform this election, is we want to have dental care for all Canadians that earn under $90,000 a year. That's something we want to do, as well as cover vision and hearing as well. And I think that's very important. Just going back to the long-term care issue again, it's something that we really need to review our long-term care situation in the country. When in the first wave of the pandemic, 80% of deaths that occurred during that time were in the long-term care homes across the country. So the NDP would be taking a very serious look at the future of the long-term care and healthcare industry to be preventing that from happening again in the future. That's very important. And something else that I've been hearing about, to move on, is that we want to protect the pensions of everyday Canadians and for everyone. For example, everybody had heard when Sears had closed and went bankrupt, many of those working people, lost their pensions. And we want to protect the pensions for everybody, for all the seniors and families that live in Fundy Royal. Just to continue on a little bit more about about our platform and as to how it relates to businesses. Well, something we want to do is we want to put people back in the workforce. Some people aren't able to always go to work because they are raising a young family. And what we want to do is we want to offer training to people to get back into the workforce, as well as offer affordable childcare program so that they don't have to make the choice. Do we have to work? Can we work? Can we not? They don't have to make that choice anymore because we'd be able to provide that for them. And something else I hear a lot about is the fact that there needs to have more affordable housing. I talk about affordability, it relates to business too, of course, because if people are able to afford their home more, of course, then they'd be able to spend more at local businesses around the area and save more. So it would work better for everyone. And it's unfortunate that in Canada, we have the highest and fastest growing housing costs in G7 nations. And of course, we'll talk more about things later and more of the platform when we have the opportunity for questions. I thank everybody for their time. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And we're going to hear from Wayne now. And Wayne, you'll notice that there's a light over there. That will go green when you begin to speak. And then when we get to the time, it'll go yellow and then red to give you a warning. So just want to go up to the podium, Wayne?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and I want to thank everybody for having me here and for the candidates being here. My name is Wayne Wheeler. I live in Sussex, and I stepped forward as a candidate for the People's Party because I'm concerned with the direction this country is going in. I'm just an average Canadian, average guy. I paved roads my whole career. I'm not a politician, and I'm not much of a public speaker, but I'll do my best to represent Fundy Royal should I succeed. So let's talk about the most important issue we're facing: freedom of expression, protecting Canadians from censorship and discrimination. The rights of Canadians to freely hold and express beliefs are being eroded at an alarming speed under the Trudeau government. Some of its recent decisions even require that Canadians renounce their most deeply held moral conviction and express opinions they disagree with. The 2018, the Liberal government denied summer job funding for organizations, including charities, that would not sign an attestation supporting abortion. In addition to these assaults on conscience, the government launched a series of regulatory attacks on free speech on the internet and is pressuring social media companies, which are already censoring speech that is politically correct, that isn't politically correct, to crack down even more. It is also considering bringing back Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. This hate speech provision was repealed by the Conservative government of 2013 because it was being used arbitrarily to censor statements that offended some people on the internet. If this section is brought back, every business will have to scour their web pages to bring them in alignment with the Act, at a detrimental cost to all businesses, large and small. In fact, the history and the social science, scientific research show that freedom of conscience and freedom of expression, when maximally protected, advance the intellectual life of a nation, foster greater ideology, diversity, and social understanding, and nurture other freedoms necessary for a successful democracy. This is why Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees citizens freedom of conscience and religion, as well as freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. So our plan, what some people find politically incorrect, offensive, or even hateful, cannot serve as the legal basis for discrimination and censorship. Canadians should be able to enjoy maximum freedom of conscience and expression as guaranteed in Section 2 of the Charter. A People's Party government will restrict the definition of hate speech in the Criminal Code to expression which explicitly advocates for the use of force against identifiable groups or persons based on protected criteria, such as religion, race, sex, or sexual orientation. Repeal any existing legislation or regulation curtailing free speech on the internet, and prevent the reinstatement of Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. will repeal C-16, M-103, C-10, and C-36. So on the economy, encourage investment and productivity growth. There are only two ways to create more wealth and prosperity. We can either work more or work more efficiently through increased productivity. Investments in research and development, innovation, more efficient production processes, machinery, and equipment are critical to improvements in productivity and living standards. Improved productivity leads to better high-paying jobs, and in a context where there are manpower shortages in many sectors, investments is a way to increase production without necessarily having to employ more workers. More government intervention in the economy is not the answer to our economic challenges. Every time the government takes an additional dollar in taxes or borrows it, this is a dollar that individuals or business people will not be able to spend or invest. So, according to the latest OECD figures, Canada's combined federal provincial corporate income tax rate is the 12th highest among the 36 OECD countries. By reducing the return on investment, a capital gains tax not only lowers overall investment, but it also hinders the allocation of the capital to its most efficient uses and discourages riskier ventures that are likely to bring more into innovation. Many of our trading partners do not tax capital gains. There was no capital gains tax in Canada until 1972. Abolishing it would encourage every Canadian to save and invest more and would give our entrepreneurs access to a larger pool of capital. Our plan Ottawa should stop taking billions of dollars from the private sector and redistribute them through subsidies. It should instead lower taxes for all businesses and encouraging saving and investment to make our economy more productive. A People's Party government will eliminate all corporate subsidies and other inefficient government interventions and unfairly support some companies or business sectors. This will generate savings of between 5 and 10 billion a year. Gradually reduce over the course of one mandate the corporate income tax rates from its current 15% down to 10%. Over the course of one mandate, gradually abolish the personal capital gains tax by decreasing the inclusion rate from the current 50% down to 0. When completed, this measure will put about $7 billion per year back into the pockets of a Canadian. And this is according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's Ready Reckoner website. So on housing, the cooling down in the overheated market, housing has become out of reach for many Canadians, in particular for young families living in big cities. The fundamental problem, however, is the mismatch between supply of and demand for housing that Ottawa, the provinces, the municipalities are making worse with other policies, in particular mass immigration and zoning restrictions. Overall inflation has become a major problem in every sector of the economy and is a consequence of inflationary monetary policy. This is the Bank of Canada printing too much money. This inflationary policy adds to the already overheated conditions of the housing market. Mass immigration is one of the main reasons for the constantly high level of demand for housing. Even if a lot more houses were to be built, supply cannot keep up with the level of this demand. This goes hand in hand with our immigration policy. Housing is primarily a provincial or local responsibility, and Ottawa's involvement over the years is contributing to the overheating of housing market in different ways. A People's Party government will substantially reduce immigration quotas. This will help reduce demand for housing and cool down markets. Modify the Bank of Canada's inflation target from 2% to 0. This will cool down inflation in all sectors, including housing. Stop funding social housing, which unfairly competes with private developers and has historically been a financial, social, and urban planning disaster in every city where it's become widespread. Privatize or dismantle the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation.
If I can have your attention, please. You're running over time, so I might ask you to wrap it up.
Yep, not a problem. Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Okay, Carol's going to clean the podium, and then we're going to hear from Whitney Dykeman, who's going to get up and give her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Chamber for inviting me here today and for all of our candidates that showed up this morning. It's an important time in the Government of Canada, and an informed choice is the best choice. So I'm very excited to talk to you about the Liberal platform. Our Liberal platform constitutes 6 pillars, and they range from fighting the fight against COVID-19 to reconciliation. So we'll start with the first one, continuing the fight against COVID-19. When the pandemic hit, the Liberal team moved quickly to ensure every Canadian had a vaccine. That's why we procured the world's most diverse vaccine portfolio and secured enough vaccines for everyone, 2 months ahead of schedule. Now it's time for our kids to go back to school and more people to go back to work. We need to get the job done on vaccines and finish the fight against COVID-19. We're looking at requiring travelers on trains, planes, cruise ships, and other vessels to be vaccinated. Launching a $1 billion COVID-19 proof of vaccination fund and to support provinces and territories who implement requirements for proof of vaccines. Procure enough vaccines to ensure all Canadians have access to free COVID-19 booster shots, and help kids get back to school and parents get back to work safely with new support to improve indoor ventilation and air quality. We'll also continue to invest in COVID-19 research and help provinces and territories with PPE, rapid testing, and clear up the backlog in surgeries caused by COVID-19. Our second pillar is a more resilient economy. At every step, our Liberal government has stood up for middle-class people. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we moved quickly to support businesses so they could stay open and keep their workers on the payroll with programs like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. To continue growing our economy, we plan on helping businesses recover and supporting them to create jobs and hire the workers that they need. Improve Canada's employment insurance to support gig workers, self-employed people, and give workers more financial security. Boosting world-leading Canadian innovation and research. Ensuring everyone pays their fair share, including big banks and the wealthiest among us. Addressing unrepresented groups in the workforce to build a more vibrant and diverse workforce. And creating opportunities for everyone. Our third pillar is a cleaner, greener future. Climate change is the greatest long-term threat that we face as a global community, but it's also our greatest economic opportunity. That's why we have a plan to create jobs, grow the economy, protect our environment, and strengthen our communities. Our plan for a cleaner, greener future will create green jobs in communities across Canada and across sectors, cut pollution and make sure that the oil and gas sector meet our shared goal of net zero emissions by 2050, and continue to phase out coal by ending thermal coal exports by 2030. Boost clean and renewable power from coast to coast, end plastic waste by 2030, protect more of our nature, including the creation of 10 new national parks, and put a rising price on pollution and more money in the pockets of hardworking Canadians. Our fourth pillar is about healthcare for everyone. The Liberal team will strengthen Canada's universal healthcare system with a plan that will make transformative investments in the strength of our universal public healthcare system, in primary care, and long-term care, and in mental health. Hire 7,500 new doctors, nurses, and nurse practitioners. Clear the backlog of service and surgeries caused by COVID-19. Expand virtual health care. Deliver better care for seniors and others in long-term care facilities. Work to hire 50,000 new public health care workers and increase their wages of up to $25 an hour. Provide free, universal, acceptable mental health care to all Canadians. We'll continue to work with the provinces and territories to ensure every Canadian has access to a family doctor and better health care. Our fifth pillar is a home for everyone. Our re-elected Liberal government will continue to make housing more affordable and help more Canadians achieve their dream of owning their own home. We have a three-part housing plan. The first is unlocking home ownership. Liberals will help renters become owners and save for a down payment faster, reducing the costly mortgage payments and doubling the home buyer's tax credit to help young Canadians buy their first home. This plan will save the average family for their first home up to $30,000. building more homes. Liberals will build, preserve, or repair 1.4 million homes in 4 years to help increase the supply of homes available for Canadians. Protecting your rights. The Liberals will create a homeowners buyer's bill of rights to make the process of buying a home fairer, more open and transparent, and ensure homes for people and families. Our plan includes banning blind bidding, establishing a legal right to a home inspection, and banning new foreign ownership for 2 years. And to help more Canadians, we'll continue to invest in affordable housing for Indigenous communities and women. Reconciliation. This is the last of our pillar. No relationship is more important to Canada than the relationship with Indigenous people. Over the past year, the global COVID-19 pandemic has revealed and deepened social health and economic disparities for Indigenous people. That's why our Liberal team is committed to addressing these inequalities through action by confronting the legacy of residential schools, continuing our work to eliminate the clean long-term drinking water advisories, taking action to confront systemic racism against Indigenous peoples, especially in the justice and the healthcare system, launching an Indigenous urban, rural, and northern housing strategy, and further investing in housing for First Nations. We have also worked at all federal government organizations and our partners so that 80% of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action involving the Government of Canada are now completed or well underway. That's our plan for helping Canada recover, and that's our plan for 2021. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And now we'll wait to hear from Rob Moore, and Carol will clean the podium for you, Rob.
Thank you, and thank you, David, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning for what is, I believe, an important, very important time in our country, a very important conversation that we have to be having. I do want to, first of all, recognize those candidates that have put their name forward in Fundy Royal. This is no small thing to run in a federal election. The ridings, as people find out, are very large. The Fundy Royal riding goes from Quispamsis all the way up to Riverview and includes all of Kings County and Albert County. And I do want to recognize Whitney, Josh, Tim, and Wayne for putting their name forward this election. And I also want to commend and thank the Chamber of Commerce, not just for hosting this event, but for their past work on important issues when it comes to representing the small business community in our region. The vast majority of businesses in New Brunswick are small businesses, and the vast majority of the businesses in Fundy Royal are small businesses, and their livelihood is important to the sustainability of our economy. And I think back a few years ago when there was changes put forward to the way small businesses would be taxed. It was Atlantic Canada and it was chambers in Atlantic Canada. I'm thinking specifically of the St. John Chamber as well as the Sussex Chamber that conducted roundtables and educated individuals on the impact of those changes. And I'm very pleased to say that as Conservatives, we advocated for measures that would treat small business fairly. We recognize that small business owners put everything on the line, and they put their life, their work, their finances into their business and providing jobs right here in our community. And it's so important, never more important, that we have a government that understands the vital nature of small business, particularly as we come out of the last year and a half. The small business sector, the tourism sector in Fundy Royal has been hit very hard by COVID-19. And we know that business people who had worked their entire lives for the first time were looking at having to lay off employees or looking to have support themselves. A couple of items coming out of the supports that were delivered through COVID-19, including the CERB benefit, which Conservative support. Unfortunately, this $2,000 a month benefit, when it first came out, if you earned even $1, you were ineligible. And unfortunately, a small business and self-employed were ineligible. And that's why, as Conservatives, We advocated that people be allowed to earn $1,000 without having their $2,000 benefit clawed back. We advocated that small business and entrepreneurs be eligible for this support. For the first time, many of them, having paid in to the system their whole life, needed help. And it was important that we stood up for those that needed help in that moment. And that brings us to the point we're here today. Many people that I'm speaking to will say, we shouldn't be having an election right now. I agree 100%. We shouldn't be having an election, but we are having an election. And on Monday, Canadians and individuals in our region have a very important choice to make. And we have a plan to secure the future for New Brunswick, to secure the future for Canada, both in our economy, jobs, mental health, securing our country, and securing accountability in Ottawa. You know, Fundy Royal is a riding that represents suburban areas as well as rural areas. We have to have a government in Ottawa that recognizes not everybody lives in Toronto. Not everybody lives in Montreal. We have to have programs that are tailored to the reality we have here. And I'm very pleased and proud of the track record Conservatives have had in the region that's represented by the St. John Chamber of Commerce. I think of some of the marquee projects that many people felt would never happen. Harbor cleanup, clean drinking water, the $68 million contribution from the Strategic Infrastructure Fund for the Port of St. John, the establishment of the Qplex, which I was very proud to support in Quispamsis, and one of the gems of our region, and truly a gem within Fundy Royal, an attraction for our entire region and all of Canada, the completion of the Fundy Trail. And I was proud as Member of Parliament to champion that. But I was also proud that we had a government that recognized that investing in rural New Brunswick was important and that not everybody lives in a city. And to that end, we have a platform that's committing supports for the number one issue that I'm hearing right now from small business, and that is the ability to hire and the ability to staff their businesses. Many businesses in tourism, many small businesses are unable to fill available positions. Part of the challenge is as we transition that there's disincentives to take work. We need to remove those disincentives. It should always be worthwhile to take a job. We're going to do that through our Canada Job Surge Plan, which instead of paying people not to work, we're going to help businesses pay people to take an available job, up to 25% of a person's salary for 6 months for a new hire. Rebuilding Main Street, a 25% tax credit of up to $100,000 for people that invest in rebuilding Main Street. So there's tax credit for everything, but this is a tax credit for small business. And this is going to target a need very much where we are right now. And as well, the Main Street business loan, a business loan of up to $200,000, 25%, which is forgivable. We know that there was a $40,000 business loan available through COVID, but at this stage that we're in right now, that hasn't been enough, so that has to be enhanced. We need a government that understands the realities here in Atlantic Canada. You know, I was very proud to have served as a minister for ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, when we were in government as Conservatives. And unfortunately, I was the last Conservative,
just a moment,
I was the last Atlantic Canadian to hold that position, because ever since then that position has been held by someone from Ontario or Quebec. So we need to make sure we have a government that understands Atlantic Canada, understands small business, and delivers for the families and communities in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A session of our forum here. And as I've said, we've curated the questions, received dozens and dozens of them over the past couple of weeks, to such an extent there was a huge volume of them. So we've curated them down into the most popular and the most often asked. Now, the first question that I'm going to ask today, I've noticed that there's been a theme running through everyone's presentations, and it is on job creation. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have in our region. So As governments should not really be involved in creating jobs, but rather creating the environment that creates good jobs and allows the businesses to flourish. So what are 3 specific things that your party will do to improve job creation environment in the St. John region? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that, and then we're going to move on, and we're going to move to the left of Josh. So Wayne, you will be the first person to answer this question, and I'll repeat the question if you wish me to repeat it, okay? As government should not be involved in creating jobs, but creating the environment to create good jobs, what are 3 specific things your party will do to improve job creation environment in the St. John region? Wayne? Just speak from here, yeah.
Okay. We're going to lower taxes, and the People's Party government will eliminate all corporate subsidies and other inefficient government interventions. The bailouts of failing companies, regional development grants, conditional loans, loan guarantees, and implicit subsidy, tax credits, etc., that unfairly support some companies or business sectors. This will generate savings of between $5 and $10 billion a year. And then gradually reduce over the course of one mandate the corporate income tax rate from its current 15% down to 10%. When completed, these measures will make about $9.5 billion available to businesses, allowing them to increase salaries or invest in productivity improvements. And over the course of one mandate, gradually abolish the personal capital gains tax by decreasing the inclusion rate from the current 50% down to 0. When completed, this measure will put about $7 billion per year back into the pockets of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move down to this end now, and we're going to hear from the Liberal Party. As government should not be involved in creating jobs, but creating the environment to create good jobs, what are 3 specific things your party will do to improve the job creation environment in the St. John region?
Thanks for the question. Well, first and foremost, we'll start by extending the Canada Recovering Hiring Program to March the 31st of 2022. We know all companies have not recovered at the same level or frequency, so we will be extending that. But we will be investing in the digital economy here. We realized with COVID-19 that a lot of business was resuming, but online. So we have a plan to implement the Canada Digital Adoption Program, which will give micro grants of up to $2,400 to small Main Street businesses, create training and working opportunities for as many as 28,000 young people so they can assist with the technology. We also want to improve the Canadian Small Business Financing Program, increase annual financing by an estimate of $560 million to support approximately 2,900 additional businesses. And lastly, we understand there's labor shortages everywhere. So we want to improve the immigration policy by reforming economic immigration programs to expand pathways to permanent residence for temporary foreign workers and former international students through the Express Entry Point system, establish a trusted employer system for streamlining the application process for Canadian companies hiring foreign workers, and continue to work with provinces and territories and regulatory bodies to improve foreign credential recognition.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Rob. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Well, no, that's great. You know, I appreciate the question because I couldn't agree more. The challenge that I'm hearing from all over the riding, whether you're in St. Martin's or Alma or Salisbury or Quispamsis or Hampton, is the same. It's small business. They have available jobs, and we shouldn't be looking to government as the job creator. We should allow small business to create the job. They have the experts, and the problem we have right now, the number one problem, is that government is standing in the way of the creation of those jobs by providing disincentives for people to take available work. So we need to incentivize people to take the jobs that are available. I'm listening to the business community. That is the number one thing that they're saying, and we have a plan to do that. We have a plan, the Job Surge Plan, that will provide funding for businesses that are new hires, particularly hires that have been out of work for a significant amount of time. The Rebuilding Main Street program that provides business loans so businesses can expand, can build up, can prepare for the future, as well as the Rebuilding Main Street tax credit that will allow people to invest in small business, invest in businesses that need the help right now. Small business has been there for our community. They're the ones that donate. They're the ones that provide support to nonprofits and to ball teams and hockey teams. Small business is always there for us, and it's time for New Brunswickers to be there for the small business, for the entrepreneurs that take risk and employ people. We understand that as Conservatives, and that's why our programs are going to get government out of the way and help invest in businesses that are creating jobs.
Thank you, Rob. Now, certainly last but not least, Josh.
Thank you for the question. And I really think that it's a very important one too, because supporting small business is very important and medium-sized business. Three things that I would do and the NDP would do to foster creation is that what we would want to do is we would want to provide a tax credit to businesses in designated rural communities to keep our graduates and young people in the riding. That's something that I've been hearing as well. And what we also would want to do is invest in training to support underemployed groups to better access jobs and employers so they can get access to more skilled workers. That's something that's important too. And what we also do is we in the NDP, we recognize that our economy is heading to a more green job direction. So what we would also do is we would help to, for job creation, we would help to reinvest funds into green job creation, such as fields like tidal energy and solar and wind energies as well. That's something that's very important. I think all these three things go together, and in the end that we will have more jobs than we even had before by doing all these things.
Thank you so much, Josh. Now, as we've been going through these, there's a number of ideas that some of the parties have had. So obviously, this speaks to money and taxes, decreasing of taxes, and funding more programs. So the next question, obviously, is going to be, what is your party's plan to balance the budget within a realistic time frame? So we're going to continue on, and we're going to start down this end with Whitney.
With Whitney. Well, that's exciting. Just let me find that one. One moment, please. I love my notes, as everyone can see. I do. I feel a little safer when I have them in front of me, so I can refer to them. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Canada has one of the most balanced sheets in the G7, and we are committed to keeping it that way by maintaining Canada's AAA credit rating and a low and declining debt to GDP ratio. We put in place clear fiscal guardrails, which will keep Canada fiscally sustainable over the long term. So we are going to do that. Canada's COVID-19 economic response has been key in bringing Canadians and businesses through the COVID-19 shockwaves and has stabilized the economy. It's important that the support of the Canadians and businesses that we gave would have resulted in almost as large a debt burden, greater human misery, and greater long-term economic scarring if those guardrails weren't in place. Putting forward a plan that concentrates spending in the earliest part of the recovery in order to drive as fast of a return to normal as possible is the best way forward. Building a stronger and more resilient economy will improve fiscal sustainability. Building opportunities, investing in people, like the National Early Learning and Childcare, the addition of 240,000 workers in the labor force, stemming from greater access to high-quality daycare, could raise the GDP by as much as 1.2%. This is one of the most significant actions taken since the introduction of the North American Free Trade Agreement to expand economic opportunity for Canadians. Connecting people and businesses and unleashing innovation. Supports including public transit and trade infrastructure, and innovation in technology will help guide along the way.
Thank you.
Overall, the Liberals' re-election platform is expected to generate $25.5 billion in new revenue over the next 5 years.
Thank you. Now moving on to Rob, what is your party's plan to balance the budget in a realistic time frame?
Well, thank you, David. And we've set out a time frame of balancing the budget within 10 years. That's a realistic time frame. We all know that COVID has hit Canada hard. It's hit the entire globe very hard, but now we are spending money at an unsustainable rate, digging a hole for the future, and we're seeing that manifest itself in skyrocketing inflation. The cost of everything has gone up, whether it's groceries, building supplies, housing, fuel. Everything has gone up, and that's not sustainable. That's something that we're hearing from people on a fixed income like seniors. We're hearing that from the business community. So we want to have a plan to return Canada to fiscal balance, and we have a proven track record on our ability to do that. When we went through the economic downturn, when we were in government, there was a massive global economic downturn, but we still were able to responsibly return Canada to balance. And it wasn't a repeat of the 90s when we saw a balanced budget achieved by cutting and slashing major programs that we all rely on, like healthcare. Our plan involves actually increasing spending on healthcare and priority areas for Canadians, but getting Canadians back to work. And that's why I mentioned our job surge plan to instead of discouraging people from taking available jobs and providing disincentives, we want to get people back to work. We want to get business running. And Conservatives understand that business and small business is the lifeblood, and getting people back to work is how we're going to get our economy going and get back to balanced budgets.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Josh.
Thank you very much for the question. Definitely, it's important as we begin to recover from the pandemic in the future to get ourselves back to balance. Previous provincial NDP governments, for example, have been very good at balancing budgets in the past. What we see right now is what we want to do is we want to make new investments, such as what I had previously mentioned, into green energy sources, as well as tax credits in rural communities. We want to do this to make new investments to lower costs long-term in the future to make the economy more sustainable. So what we see as some people may say, well, why are you making all this new spending? Well, we make it now so that in the future, as more people are trained to jobs in the future, the economy will grow, the budget will be balanced in the future, and we will do better, even better than before.
Thank you, Josh. Now moving on to the People's Party of Canada. How do you plan to balance the budget in 3 years?
Thank you. Well, Canada's public finances are in a disaster state, and under the Liberals, the spending deficits and the national debt are exploding. The Liberal government exploited the COVID crisis to create a whole series of expensive new programs and permanently increase the size of government. The Conservatives, NDP, Bloc, Greens all supported their massive COVID spending, and none of them is committed to reducing the size of government. This is utterly irresponsible. When another recession hits or interest rates start to rise, the federal government will be in a precarious fiscal situation and could lose control of its finances. In 2021, Canada's net debt surpassed $1 trillion or 1,000 billion for the first time. Instead of paying for the deficit directly with taxes, Canadians are paying it indirectly with higher taxes on all goods and services. According to data published by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, if current policies are not adjusted, the federal government will only balance its budget again in the year 2070. So our plan, the debts and deficits are nothing more than deferred taxes on our children and grandchildren. Instead of buying votes with borrowed money, a responsible government should aggressively cut spending, balance the budget as quickly as possible, and then lower taxes in a prudent manner to put money back into Canadians' pockets. A People's Party government will get rid of the deficit by the end of the first mandate through fiscal prudence and spending cuts, including corporate welfare, foreign development aid, CBC, equalization payments, and funding for programs which are provincial or municipal responsibilities. And stop using our tax system for political ends and make it simpler and fairer, and cut personal income taxes, corporate taxes, and personal gains tax after the deficit has been eliminated. eliminated over the course of several budgets as the fiscal room is found to allow it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question now. In our region particularly, we have a challenge with population growth and immigration. So in order for us to meet some of these targets and to be able to implement some of these initiatives that you have, we are going to need more people. We're going to need more population growth and immigration growth. So if we need to attract more immigrants to advance, what plans do you have to support and enhance immigration to our region? And we'll start with you, Rob.
Well, thank you, David. And, you know, this is something that I think is going to be emerging more and more in New Brunswick. As the world looks at New Brunswick and as Canada looks at New Brunswick, there's a huge opportunity for our province to be the place to raise a family, the place to grow a business, a place to invest. But we have to make the right decisions now in order to do that. We've seen, all of us know stories of people that have been moving here from outside of the province or moving back to the province because New Brunswick is a place where they see themselves raising that family and they see themselves being able to find a job, and that's exciting. But we need to take advantage of that. One of the biggest barriers when it comes to immigration, and not just immigration to our province, but having people come to our province and stay rather than come to our province and leave. Part of that is about jobs, and one of the main things we'd like to work on in this regard is credential recognition. We all know stories of individuals that are trained, they're credentialed to perform a job, but when they arrive at Canada, there's trouble transitioning that into a credential here within one of our provinces. And that's important, and it has to change. So while maintaining the standards that we have within our credentialed areas of business within our country, within our provinces, we have to look at a way to help transition people's credentials so that they're relevant here and able to be fulsomely employed here in New Brunswick. So it's a great opportunity. I think New Brunswick is on the cusp of growth and an opportunity, but we have to make the right decisions, and they have to be decisions that reflect our small business reality in New Brunswick, and that's why I spoke of the small business job surge, our plan to get people back to work here in New Brunswick.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to next to you, Josh.
Thank you very much for the question. I do think that further immigration is very important. We do have an aging population in New Brunswick, so it's very important in order to keep our economy going to add to the population. So what I would do in order to support and enhance immigration, the NDP, is I would encourage and promote the Fundy region for newcomers. We have a lovely place here. We have wonderful people who are very kind. Maritime is a great place for that. And people like friendly people, so they come here. And what we want to do is we want to end the cap on applications to sponsor families, parents and grandparents to support family reunification on the immigration file. That would bring us more immigrants. It would increase morale too by having families reunited. And we would want to take on the unscrupulous immigration consultants and regulating the industry. And we would want to get rid of the backlog and work with Canadians on refugee resettlement. It's very important to help the other countries right now, especially with everything that's going on in Afghanistan and other countries. We want to help resettle them, bring them here, help them find work, train them, and we would grow our economy, have more workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Moving on to you. Okay.
So right now, 26% of the immigrants and refugees who come to Canada every year are directly chosen because they have the right qualifications and work experience to fill our economic needs. And they come through, most of the others are the dependents and the spouses, and they come through the family reunification program or as refugees, but they do not work and do not have the skills that we need. if they find work. So the Democratic studies have shown that newcomers are a bit younger on average than Canadians, but not enough to have a noticeable impact on the rate of aging. And they've made matters worse by increasing the number of parents and grandparents accepted under the inflation program. So despite Canada already accepting more immigrants than most any other country, the government supported an unsustainable increase in the annual immigration intake and are using mass immigration as a political tool. So our plan, our immigration policy, can benefit Canadians only if we welcome the right kind of immigrants. If we should prioritize Canada's economic interests and be calibrated in a way that does not jeopardize Canadian values and the maintenance of our national identity. So the People's Party government will substantially lower the number of immigrants and refugees Canada accepted every year from 350,000 to between 100 and 150,000, depending on economic and other circumstances. Reform the immigration point system and the related programs to accept a larger proportion of economic immigrants with the right skills. Limit the number of temporary foreign workers and make sure that they fulfill temporary positions and do not compete unfairly with Canadian workers. Change the law to make birth tourism illegal. Increase resources for CSIS, the RCMP, and the Canadian Immigration and Citizens to do interviews and thorough background checks on all classes of immigrants. And and reform the immigration point system. I already said that. Excuse me. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Excuse me. One of the things that we've heard mentioned is, in terms of a challenge, is housing. The housing situation in a lot of our markets. Affordable housing is extreme issue. So that's an issue in our region. So how do you plan to stimulate investment in the private sector to promote growth? And do you have plans for rent controls? And the final portion of that question is, are you going to tax the proceeds from a home sale, even if it is your primary residence? So there's a couple of things to start with there, and I believe we go to you this time to start. Yep.
Thank you. Well, the housing is cooling down an overheated market, and the issue is the housing has become out of reach for many Canadians, and particularly for young families living in big cities. The fundamental problem, however, is a mismatch between supply of and demand of housing, or for housing, that Ottawa, the provinces, the municipalities are making worse with other policies, in particular mass immigration and zoning restrictions. Overall inflation has become a major problem in every sector of the economy, and it is the consequences of inflationary monetary policy. That is the Bank of Canada printing too much money. The inflationary policy adds to the already overheated conditions of the housing market. Mass immigration is one of the main reasons for the constantly high level of demand for housing. Even if a lot more houses were to be built, supply cannot keep up with the level of demand. This goes hand in hand with our immigration policy. Our plan is the housing is primarily a provincial or local responsibility. Ottawa's involvement over the years is contributing to the overheating of the housing market in different ways. A People's Party government will substantially reduce immigration quotas, and this will help reduce demand for housing and cooling down these markets. Modify the Bank of Canada's inflation target from 2 to 0%, and this will cool down inflation in all sectors, including housing. Stop funding social housing, which unfairly competes with private developers and has historically been a financial, social, and urban planning disaster in every city where it's become widespread. Privatize or dismantle the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation instead of helping to cool it down. All it has ever done is encourage Canadians to buy houses they can't afford and accumulate massive amounts of debt. And working with provinces to curb speculation and money laundering by foreign non-resident buyers in Canada's land and housing markets. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I made a little mistake here as I didn't go back to the Liberal Party on immigration, so we'll allow you to answer the immigration question, and then we'll go to the next one and come back for the housing, okay? So
Perfect.
My apologies for that.
No worries. Thank you so much. Attracting and keeping skilled immigrants to the Fundy Royal region is crucial to our economic prosperity and future. We know this, and so that's why we have a pilot to bring skilled newcomers to smaller communities and help local economies grow via a rural and northern immigration pilot. So that'll include 2,000 skilled laborers that we will be it's a pilot project, so we will implement those people into the communities around Fundy Royal and the rest of Canada. We have a four-point approach to improving immigration. We will reform economic immigration programs to expand pathways to permanent residences for temporary foreign workers through the express entry point system that we've established, build on the economic mobility pathways pilot, and we'll work with employers and communities across Canada to welcome those 2,000 skilled refugees to fill the labor shortages that we're seeing currently in the healthcare system. Establish a trusted employer system to streamline the application process, which is quite a nightmare for Canadian companies hiring temporary foreign workers to fill labor shortages, and continue to work with provinces, territories, and regulatory bodies to improve foreign credential recognition. So that's our plan going forward for immigration with the Liberal platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Rob about the affordable housing. My apologies again.
Okay, well, thank you, David. And I think you had asked about the taxation of capital gains from the sale of the home. We know that, I think it was in 2016, the CRA started to ask if you had sold your home. And I know that raised a lot of questions for people. Well, why are they asking this since the sale of a principal residence has always been free of capital gains tax? So absolutely not. We will not be, as a Conservatives, taxing in any way, shape, or form the sale of one's principal residence, nor should it be taxed, because this is the single biggest purchase most people make. They've put everything into their home, and the cost of everything has gone up. So when they finally sell, maybe in retirement years or maybe to downside, the last thing we need to have is the government taking a piece of the proceeds of those sales. On the affordability of housing, we want to introduce new options for first-time home buyers when it comes to mortgages to impart more stability. We need to fix the stress test when it comes to entrepreneurs, business owners, people in the gig economy that are unable to get a mortgage that's affordable because of the current tests that are in place. So that has to, we have to recognize not everybody works in a 9-to-5 job and has a paycheck every 2 weeks. We have to recognize that those people need housing, and the stress test is hurting their ability to get a mortgage. And we also have to limit both the foreign speculators as well as the money laundering that's taken place in some of Canada's most superheated housing markets, because that is absolutely driving up the cost of housing for everybody. So affordability is a big theme in this election, and we have a plan to make housing and the other things that we need more affordable, and keep more money in the pockets of Canadians and in our region where it belongs.
Thank you. Now, the disabled population is not very. Oh, sorry.
Open, Josh.
Didn't we open with you? Pardon me?
This one I hadn't answered yet. For the,
You have to answer this one.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I'm getting really screwed up here. Josh.
Thank you for the question. And affordable housing is it's something that's very important to me and very important to the people across the St. John region and across the Fundy region as well. I'm somebody that's lived in cooperative housing before, twice in my life. The NDP, we have a plan to invest in affordable housing by building 500,000 new affordable housing units across the country within 10 years. And we support the housing cooperatives. What we plan to do for affordable housing, in addition to building the new units, what we intend to do is we intend to offer incentive for those who would build affordable housing units. We would waive the GST and HST for people that build these homes, build these units. There'd be no none of that HST on that. And as for, it's very important that our people do get a nice affordable home. And so what we would do in that regard is there would be a 20% levy that would be put on foreign investor home buyers, because our people need affordable homes. It's very important. There would be no no taxation on the primary sale of the primary residence. We're not increase that. We're all about helping the working people. And if it's a primary residence. So we would be looking at that and to help out home buyers as well by reintroducing 30-year terms for CHMC mortgages on entry-level homes to make monthly payments smaller for people so they could better afford it. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to you. Yeah. Yep, and then back to you now. Now back to the Liberal for affordable housing.
Thank you. I feel that the Liberal plan for affordable housing is the best put forth in the 2021 election. We have a three-prong approach to make housing affordable for Canadians. The first is unlocking a home and owning your home. The second is building and building up the capacity of the homes. And the third is introducing a homeowner's bill of rights. So how we will get people in homes, let's unlock the purchase of a home. We'll introduce a new rent-to-own program to make it easier for renters to go towards the path towards home ownership. The Liberal government will commit $1 billion in loans and grants to develop, scale up, and to rent their projects with private and nonprofit and co-partners, creating a pathway to home ownership for renters within 5 years. We'll introduce a tax-free home savings account, which will allow Canadians under the age of 40 to save up to $40,000 towards their first purchase of a home. We'll double the first-time home buyers tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000, which will put $1,500 back into the pockets of the homeowner. Our plan to build, we revitalize an additional 250,000 homes over a 4-year period, on top of the 285,000 homes currently being built each year. This will reach nearly 1.4 million homes to be built, preserved, or modified over the next 4 years. To protect renters, a re-elected Liberal government will stop rent evictions by deterring unfair rent increases that fall outside the normal changes. We know we need to work with the provinces to get this done, which is why we will convene a federal and provincial regulatory to develop a national action plan to increase consumer protection and transparency in real estate transactions. We will also work with provinces and municipalities to develop a framework to better regulate the role of foreign buyers in the Canadian housing market, so that this money does not either leave the housing being available for Canadians. We have no plans ever to tax the primary residence of homeowners. We understand that a lot of homeowners have built and paid their mortgage off, and that's part of their plans for retirement. So that is our Liberal plan, and we think we'll put a lot of Canadians in homes with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll get to the next question. My apologies for messing up the order there. Excuse me. The disabled population are very underrepresented in government and in the workforce in general. Now, each platform talks about increasing the disability credit, etc., but these credits mean nothing if disabled do not have an income. What will each party specifically do to allow someone who's disabled to be able to enter the workforce and earn a wage that will allow them to contribute as well as live? So we're going to start the first question with Rob.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. And this is a timely question because as I have traveled around the riding of Fundy Royal, around our region, the number one issue that I'm hearing from small business is an inability to fill available job vacancies. We need people that have barriers to taking employment. We need to help break down those barriers. So our job training fund is going to be portions of it specifically tailored to help those that have a barrier to taking employment. We established the and we're enhancing the disability tax credit. We also established and enhanced the Enabling Accessibility Fund. The Enabling Accessibility Fund provides funding for owners of buildings to make them accessible for workers, accessible for people who have barriers to taking employment. So this is the number one issue that we're hearing, is about filling these jobs and having every Canadian that wishes to have a job, including those that have a disability or have a barrier to taking employment, encouraging and enabling them to take that job is part of what our plan is all about.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Josh.
Thank you for the question. This one is something that is very important to me about getting incentives to have disabled individuals be put back into the workplace, because I am an individual myself who lives with a disability. So something that I have noticed that needs to be done is that there needs to be sensitivity training and workshops for workplaces, so that all employees are everywhere are treated together, work together, all the same, equally and fairly. I think that's important. If everybody is trained, then more people that are disabled, some may struggle at a fear for mistreatment to go to work in some cases. That would eliminate that. Everybody would understand each other a lot better. Something else we would want to do is propose incentives for employers to hire and retain individuals who are disabled. I think that's something very important too. If somebody is given the chance to show what they can do, they will show the people that they too can contribute the same way anybody else can. And what I would want to do is I would want to work to provide funding for specialized equipment if that is needed for somebody, if that is a barrier for somebody to be able to get into the workforce and to be able to stay. That is something that's important too, to have it everywhere equal for everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you. Moving on to you.
We don't have a specific platform. However, this would fall within a job creation plan. Disability tax credits for individuals and tax credits or grants for homeowners to make accessibility more affordable. And so I guess I'm not speaking from the heart here. I think every Canadian should have access to jobs and be able to create their own jobs. It doesn't matter who they are. And I do believe there has been programs put in place for the disabled, and maybe we should ramp them up a little bit and to help out. But everyone should have that choice to go out and work in the public and with the public or in the private sector, create their own jobs. Everyone should have that opportunity to do that. And I personally would stand fully behind that. So I thank you.
Thank you. Moving down this way.
Thanks. That's a great question. Over the past 6 years, the Liberal government has made accessibility and disability inclusion a priority. We understand that Canadians want to work, regardless of their current circumstances. Our re-elected Liberal government will develop and implement an employment strategy for Canadians with disabilities. This strategy will be focused on supports for workers and employers, creating inclusive and welcoming workplaces. It will also include investment in the Ready, Willing, and Able inclusive hiring program in support of individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism spectrum disorder. Creating a new stream of the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy program to support 5,000 opportunities a year for young people. This would help young Canadians with disabilities gain the skills, experience, and abilities they need to make a successful transition into the labor market and build successful careers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're winding down, just a few more questions left, but the next question has to do with a topic that everybody's mentioned, and it's kind of a horizontal thing now, and a new lens that we have to look at everything, and that has to do with climate change. So what is your party's position on climate change targets? And we'd like to know specifically, do you advocate for either increasing the climate change targets, remaining on status quo, or decreasing the climate change targets? And we'll move to you, Josh, first.
Thank you for the question. A climate change target and climate change is something very important to me, and I would be advocating to increase targets. I would be wanting to, under the NDP banner, we would want to reduce the emissions to 50% less than the 2005 levels by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. As well, introduced initiatives such as electric transit as well. That's something that's important. I feel it follows under that umbrella because it would help to reduce our emissions by, instead of having gas and oil powered transit, to have electric. That would help that reduce that, and reducing our reliance on fossil fuel to go to tidal, solar, and wind energy would also assist us in lowering our emissions to raise target further. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, People's Party of Canada.
Thank you. Climate change alarmism is based on flawed models that have consistently failed at correctly predicting the future. None of the cataclysmic predictions that have been made about the climate since the 1970s have come true. No new ice age, no steady warming in the direct relation with increases to CO2 levels, no disappearance of the polar ice caps, no exceptional rise in ocean levels, no abnormal increase in catastrophic weather events, no widespread crop failure and famine. In fact, CO2 is beneficial for agriculture, and there has recently been a measurable greening of the world in parts thanks to higher levels. Despite what global warming propaganda claims, CO2 is not a pollutant. It is an essential ingredient for life on Earth and needed for plant growth. So our plan, given the uncertainties of the scientific basis of global warming and the certainties about the huge costs of measures designed to fight it, there is no compelling reason to jeopardize our prosperity with more government interventions. The People's Party government will withdraw from the Paris Accord and abandon unrealistic greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Stop sending billions of dollars to developing countries to help them reduce their emissions. Abolish the federal government's carbon tax and leave it to provincial governments to adopt programs to reduce emissions if they want to. Abolish subsidies for green technology and let private players develop profitable and efficient alternatives. Invest in adaptation strategies, if possible, arise as a result of any natural climate change. Prioritize implementing practical solutions to make Canadians' air, water, and soil cleaner, including bringing clean drinking water to remote First Nations communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving down to the Liberal Party. What is your party's position on climate change targets? Do you advocate increasing, status quo, or decreasing?
The Liberal plan has a very ambitious green plan, and I believe that it is probably the best one out there of all the parties. It's doable, it's affordable, and we're making real progress. However, I think a green plan is always susceptible to improvement. So as science becomes more available, I think our plan would be revisited each year just to make sure that we are in tune with our targets. We know that climate change is real, and Canadians want a real plan to fight it. So we put together Canada's first ever climate plan, a plan that has grown more ambitious every year. Together we've assembled the building blocks for a safer, healthy and prosperous net zero emissions future. We need to move forward with an even more ambitious plan to tackle climate change, one that seizes the opportunities of the green economy and positions Canada for long-term economic growth, because they do go hand in hand. Today, Canada's emissions are projected to be 36% lower in 2030 compared to 2005 levels, but we know there's more to do. We have invested over $100 billion to fight climate change and build a clean economy for all Canadians, including $53.6 billion for green recovery. But for these investments to deliver, Canadians need a government with a real plan to make climate goals. A re-elected Liberal government will deliver on all policy and fiscal measures outlined in our strengthened climate plan from December of 2020, implement the recently passed Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, and advance new measures to achieve an ambitious 40 to 45% reduction in emissions by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. And lastly, we'll work with all Canadians and the Net Zero Advisory Body to identify ways to further accelerate climate action that will put us on a trajectory to achieve net zero emissions as soon as possible and no later than 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to
Thank you, David. And, you know, it was our government that signed on to the 2030 Paris Accord. We have a plan that is costed to meet those targets, but meet those targets in a way that protects Canada's competitiveness and protects jobs in Canada. And, you know, I want to turn to that at this moment. Canada produces less than 2% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions compared to China, that's around 30% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm certainly not advocating that we put Canada in a competitive disadvantage with the rest of the world. We know we have some of the highest environmental standards in the world in Canada. And right here in New Brunswick, right here in the St. John region, we have, for example, an oil refinery that provides important jobs. So we need a plan that protects jobs here in New Brunswick and also reaches our climate targets. We have that plan. We're not willing to throw away jobs, and we're not willing to pile on cost to consumers that makes life even more affordable. We know that affordability has been an emerging theme right now in this election, and for example, a carbon tax of $170 a ton, well, that's 40 cents a liter. And this is important in a riding like Fundy Royal, where urban transit is not an option, where people have to drive to get the kids to hockey, to get to work. All of that comes out of a family's budget. So a 40 cents a liter is too high a cost, and that's not a cost that I would want to see imposed on my constituents. So we have a plan that meets those Paris targets of a 30% reduction by 2030. The world needs more of Canada, not less. Canada's a leader in carbon capture and storage, in technologies that can reduce our carbon footprint, and we're prepared to promote those to the world.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Dean now. We are going to wrap up our forum. Thank you, everyone. As a moderator, I thank you all for your civility and your dedication to answering with content, and I'll hand it over to Dean now for wrap-up.
I'd just like to, on behalf of the Chamber and all of our members, like to thank the four candidates that gave up their time this morning to have a conversation, to communicate directly with our members, and to reiterate what Rob had said. It's hard to put yourself out there in front of the public to be picked. And on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you all for putting your names out there. Without people willing to put their names out there, the democracy does not work. So it is vital that we get informed and everybody go vote, because without voting, we don't have a say. So again, thank everybody for being here. Thank everybody for participating and watching and listening online. And hopefully we've improved your knowledge of the candidates and help you get on the road to your choice. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Okay.